Thank you, Cody. Thank you, worship team, for leading us in worship. Let me introduce you to one of my favorite school teachers growing up. Her name was Miss Unsworth, and she was so cool. She had an El Camino. This was a cool car. Let's see. This was one sweet car. And she was very old. She was probably 26 or 27, and she taught grade 5. And so everyone looked forward to taking Miss Unsworth grade 5 class. She was always the first one in the spring to say, let's have class outside. Okay. And she also led in our maple tree tapping. I grew up in the country, and every spring the whole school would engage in maple syrup making, and we'd tap trees. And the other thing she would do, in the winter, she would give these grade 5 students, 10-year-olds, compasses and send us into the bush. And we would do what's called orienteering. And we would navigate and check our coordinates, and we would kind of find our way through the bush to get back to the school. And most times, most students came back. But every once in a while, you'd hear stories about a faulty compass, and I'm convinced I got one of those faulty compasses. But a compass is an ingenious device which helps us point in the direction of north. North Pole, a true north, North Star, more accurately, a magnetic north. And so this is an instrument to help us navigate our way through whatever kind of context we might find ourselves in. Now, there is such a thing as faulty or issues with compasses. And so in 1915, the HMS E-13 submarine ran aground in Danish territorial waters, and whereupon two German destroyers attacked it and destroyed it. In 1938, Douglas Corrigan was flying home from New York to California. 28 hours later, he ended up in Dublin, Ireland. And he earned the name Wrong Way Corrigan as a bit of a nickname. So you need a compass that works. Faulty compasses can get you into a lot of trouble. Whether you're crossing the ocean, whether you're navigating the bush when you're 10 years old with Miss Unsworth, or in life. We all need some sort of compass, some sort of means by which we gain some direction and some purpose and a sense of mission. Something that answers the why question within us all. Too many people live life disillusioned, frustrated, anxious, irritated, cynical with life because they lack direction. The Bible speaks a great deal about direction. A great deal about a sense of why, a sense of purpose, a sense of mission, a reason. And one of my favorite passages on this, and we looked at this a couple of years ago, and we did a few studies in Jeremiah, but it's Jeremiah chapter 2 where God is rebuking Judah, and on the inspiration of God, this is what Jeremiah says to the people of Judah. He says, "For my people have committed two evils." This was greatly exasperating to God. "For they have first forsaken me." They forgot me. They've turned their back on me. The fountain of living waters, quite a descriptor for God, an abstraction, but a beautiful one at that. "And they've hewed out cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns that cannot hold water." Now, a cistern was basically a clay pot that would gather rainwater, and over time, in the hot climate, there in the desert with dust blowing and sand blowing, these cisterns would often become contaminated and full of debris and dirt. And so the analogy that God is speaking to Judah here is, he says, you've departed from me, a source of fresh water, a spring, a fountain, a well. And instead, you've chosen to drink from a cistern which is dirty and contaminated. Furthermore, it's broken. It doesn't even hold water. It will not satisfy, at least not for any enduring purpose. And so clearly, Jeremiah was getting at something far more fundamental, far more foundational than actual drinking water. He was appealing to that deeper sense of longing, that craving, that hunger, that thirst of our souls. Now, I don't want to sound unduly predictable here, but we've got all kinds of cisterns. We're surrounded by them. And there are, of course, the classics, and then there are, of course, the more subtle ones. And many of these are not evil in and of themselves by no means. But power, control, if you've ever had it, and this might be very different from leadership, but the ability to control inputs and outputs, to control people, to have power over decisions that are made, and to know that within you lies that control, that can be an elixir. And for those of you who haven't yet tasted it, when you taste it, you might very much like it. And of course, pleasure, our appetite to please the senses, or perhaps work, that sense of accomplishment, that sense of affirmation, that sense of respect. And again, these might be entirely good and appropriate things, but these things can become cisterns to us whereby we confuse desire with the deeper longing in our soul, and we drink at these cisterns. And so whether it's work, whether it's money, whether it's sports, whether it's shopping, sex, entertainment, all of these things have the possibility and can bring the allure of offering something that it will deliver, and it never does. And it can be a broken cistern. We have a wonderful book in the Bible, Ecclesiastes, which describes an incredible case study on a person who literally had it all. Knowledge, education, wisdom. He surrounded himself with aesthetic beauty, gardens, palaces. He could avail himself to any sort of appetite, whether it was food, or whether it was sexual, or whether it was musical, whatever he wanted, he could have. And at the conclusion of the matter, without God, it was empty. Broken cisterns. Now, what often happens with a broken cistern is we drink at that well, and it gives us a buzz. And then after a while, it doesn't. And we think, oh, I just need to go back more. I need to go deeper. And so a little bit of power is good, now I need more power. A little bit of sex is good, now I need crazy sex. And then we think, now I just need to go deeper into this cavernous void, this abyss. Keep drinking there. And therein, of course, lies the seeds of addiction. Or perhaps we drink at this cistern and it gives us a bit of satisfaction, and then we get tired, and then we maybe go to another cistern. But whether we camp at one cistern or we go to multiple cisterns, it is a confusion of what desire is and its appropriate qualities, and how it can be distorted, and it becomes a counterfeit in our lives. And it promises to deliver something that it never can deliver because it was never designed to deliver that. Listen to these two passages from James and from Peter. James chapter 1, verse 14 says, "But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire." These are not external prompts. Then desire, when it's conceived, gives birth to sin, and when sin is fully grown, brings forth death. Peter says something very similar in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 17 and 18. He says, "These are waterless springs and mists driven by the storm." He's talking about false teachers here, and what they promise and what they in fact deliver. Waterless springs, mists driven by the storm. For them, the gloom of utter darkness has been reserved. For speaking loud boasts of folly, they entice by sensual passions of the flesh those who are barely escaping from those who live in error. They promise them freedom. Hey, this is a good thing. But they themselves are slaves. Corruption. For whatever overcomes a person, to that he is enslaved. And so we all hunger for something deeper. We're created with a craving, created with a longing, created with an ache, created with a thirst. And we're constantly looking to satisfy, to placate that aching, that thirst. And the scriptures talk about where that ultimate answer is. St. Augustine said, "You have made us for yourself, O God, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you." So here you are at Briercrest. And I want to ask you, do you have a sense of mission, a sense of purpose, a why? Do you have a sense that those deeper longings which ache are being satisfied? Because that is a question that every human being must answer. Why are you here? And what is your purpose? Last week we talked about a good start today I want to talk about a good purpose. Now, we all hear these tragic stories of these high-profile celebrities who take their lives. And we're perplexed. We're mystified. We don't know what to think about it. We certainly do know that some of them are related to mental health issues. And mental health issues are real. We need to fully acknowledge that, process it, and seek support and help for it. However, I can't help but think in some cases, with some people, and it might be exacerbated by mental health, it might be amplified, but there might be for so many a deeper underlying issue that relates to meaning in life. And 3 weeks ago, some of you heard about this. 3 weeks ago, 24-year-old gamer David Katz shot himself and his competition, 21-year-old Eli Clayton, 27-year-old Taylor Robertson, because of a Madden NFL football video game. Were there mental health issues? Later research demonstrated that. But surely there's more to life than winning a video game. And so we ache and we hunger and we thirst for some sense of why, some sense of meaning, some sense of purpose. And I want to invite you, even here at Briercrest, to reflect deeply on the potential broken cisterns in your life, and rather on the legitimate spring of living water. So I just want you to listen to this psalm. I want to read to you from Psalm 63. And just listen. If you'd like to turn to it, I invite that, but maybe some of you just want to listen. And I want you to study this passage, bathe in it later. Oh God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. Literally, early, I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there is no water. David is away from home. He's fleeing. Not Saul, but Absalom. And he says, God, I need you. And I have a thirst for you and you alone. Verse 2, so I've looked upon you in the sanctuary, beholding your power and glory. He remembers worshiping at the tabernacle and how good that was, but now he's in the desert. And he says, because of your steadfast love is better than life, my lips will praise you. He allowed his thoughts to ruminate on the steadfast love, the loyal love, the covenant love, the enduring love of God that he had for him. And he found comfort. And so, I'll bless you as long as I live. In your name, I will lift up my hands. And lifting up hands has at least two purposes. One, that of offering your life to God. And the other, certainly receiving from God his blessing and provision. And as he thought about the provision of God and the care of God, he couldn't help but lift up his hands and offer himself to God and receive God's blessing. My soul will be, here's the word, satisfied. My soul will be satisfied as with fat and rich food, and my mouth will praise you with joyful lips. This is better than Thanksgiving. This is better than Christmas dinner. This is better than birthday party. It was the best meal. This was better. He was satisfied in his soul and his spirit. When I remembered you upon my bed, and I meditated on you the watches of the night, when I was awake and when I was sleepless and was full of anxiety and worry and concern, I just allowed my thoughts to go towards you, and it settled my spirit. For you have been my help. And helper is never a descriptor of someone less than or weaker. It is someone to meet a void and to come alongside and support. And in the shadow of your wings, I'll sing for joy. My soul clings to you. Your right hand upholds me. And David here says, I found satisfaction in God. David found satisfaction in God when he sought God to quench his thirst. He found satisfaction in God when he looked to God and allowed his mind to be lifted up by just the very essence of God, by his power, by his glory, and by his loyal love. He found satisfaction in God when he remembered God and he ruminated and meditated and allowed his mind to keep dwelling on just the very person of God. And he found satisfaction in God when he rested in the shadow of his wings, there in a position of protection and security, and he found satisfaction in God because he clung to a God in ways that he could cling to no one else. And so Jesus says, when asked, what's the most important thing in life? He says, to love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And to love your neighbors yourself. On these two things, everything pivots and everything rests, all the law and the prophets. It's about a relationship. And Cody just read from John chapter 15, abiding in Christ, remaining in Christ. And through the scriptures, we have all these descriptors of what it's like to live in communion with God. And it talks about living the life as a disciple. It talks about the Christian walk, walking by faith, walking in obedience. It uses the analogy of having fellowship with God, of carrying your cross, of praying without ceasing, of putting on Christ, of clothing yourself with Christ, of having the mind of Christ, of setting your mind on things above and not things below. And all of these, while they all have nuanced, distinctive meanings, I'm not minimizing that, but they all have this common element that this is about an enduring relationship. This is a state of relationship and a state of being when you're in communion and in fellowship and abiding and remaining and walking with God. And this is what it means to live out and flesh out a why in your life. To drink at the spring of living waters as opposed to these broken cisterns which do not hold and do not deliver. So let me summarize this and let me put a little bit of my own flesh onto this and how I see it and I understand it, which I think is both biblical but aligned with my experience. I came to Christ as a young teen, catalyzed by the brokenness and the devolution and the unraveling and the deterioration and the devastation of my parents' marriage. And in that pain, I sought out something more substantive, something that offered hope and peace and forgiveness, and it was Jesus. And when you and I recognize the emptiness and the void in our lives, and we discover the message of Jesus, and we discover the person of Jesus, and we place our faith there, and we start a relationship there, everything begins to look differently. We've met that spring of living water, that fountain of living water. But here's what happened to me as a young teen, and here's what happens to all of us and continues to happen to us. We come into a relationship with God, and if you have not yet done that, please, you will keep searching and keep drinking in broken cisterns and not being satisfied. But even when we come into that relationship, we look over, oh, here's a cistern. Let me have a little taste. Ooh, kind of nice. And it may not be a dark, evil, sinful thing, but it is a counterfeit to the real thing. And we drink there for a while. And then we drink someone else for a while. And here's my experience. When I dwell and focus and abide and remain and bathe in the wonder of my relationship with God, I feel cleaner. I make better decisions. I'm more generous in my giving. I'm more thoughtful in my engagement. And I'm just in a better headspace because I know I'm in that place where I'm walking with God. And the more I feed that, the more I enjoy it, the more I abide, and the more satisfied I feel. And I also know when I sip at other cisterns and I allow selfishness to win, or a disgruntled spirit, or bitterness, or pride, or greed, or whatever it may be, and I sip at those cisterns for a while, my appetite for the good is diminished. And my appetite for these broken, contaminated, dirty cisterns leave me wanting. You are surrounded by cisterns today, And in the future, you will have so many cisterns you can drink at. And so many of them will present as normal, good, and healthy things in their proper place. But these have all the potential to be counterfeits in your life. The only spring that ultimately, truly satisfies is God. And so this is why we have chapel, and this is why we work through the ethic of the church in the Sermon on the Mount. This is why we study the scriptures, because we're wanting to maintain and feed, and not just change the way we think, but change the way we live, and then change the way we feel, because we're walking in communion with God. This is our why. This is the good purpose. Briercrest has a mission statement. We're a community of learning that calls students to seek the kingdom of God, to be profoundly shaped by the scriptures, and to be formed spiritually, intellectually for lives of service. And we have a vision aspiration to equip the church and engage the world. These are real aspirations, real objectives that flesh out our strategic planning. But all of that is rooted in something far more fundamental. It's our own relationship with God. This is not a religious ideology. It's not just a worldview. It is a relationship. And if you've never drunk at the spring of living water, you need to put your trust in Jesus. Turn from your broken cisterns and turn to Christ and what he did in the cross. And for all of us in this room, because the rebuke was to Judah, his people, my people have committed two terrible evils. They've left me, they've departed from me, the spring of living water, and they sought satisfaction through broken cisterns. Don't drink at those cisterns. They will not satisfy long term. They'll give you a buzz for a short while, but they'll not satisfy. So while you're here, learn, grow, engage, be involved. Feed your soul. Feed that relationship with Jesus. Feed that intimacy, because that is what it is, a relationship. Let's bow our heads and close our eyes. Oh God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land.